We welcome you. We welcome you all to this second webinar in a series of 3 dedicated to unearthing the racist roots of the climate crisis. Today, as you know, our focus is on the testimonies of resistance by Indigenous peoples. This series is a creative collaboration by 3 groups. The Center for Climate Justice and Faith here at Pacific Lutheran Theological Seminary, a part of California Lutheran University. The Certificate in Racial Justice and Faith, also here at PLTS, and Lutherans Restoring Creation. To begin, we note the importance of this day, Juneteenth. It is fitting that this session happens on this day. The enslavement of African people and the genocidal attack on Indigenous peoples of the lands that became known as the Americas are, as you all know, inextricably connected. Both are the terrible fruit of colonialism and its enactment of white supremacy in its most virulent form. Moreover, the colonizing disease of white supremacy continues to fester today as an underpinning of climate change and the racial injustice that accompanies it. So, in learning more about Indigenous resistance to climate colonialism and other forms of environmental racism today, we honor the unimaginably courageous resistance of enslaved Africans and their descendants. And we gain power for dismantling white supremacy and for radically reshaping society along the lines of justice, compassion, and ecological sanity. In that vein, our 2 speakers today are Sarah Augustine and Josias Viera. Sarah Augustine is a Pueblo, that is Tewa, descendant, and is co-founder and executive director of the Coalition to Dismantle the Doctrine of Discovery. She is also co-founder of the Suriname Indigenous Health Fund. Sarah has represented the interests of Indigenous community partners in many national and international venues, including the United Nations, the Organization of American States Commission on Human Rights, and the World Health Organization. She is a columnist for the Anabaptist World, and she co-hosts the Dismantling the Doctrine of Discovery podcast. Sarah has taught at a number of universities and lives in Washington State, where she serves on multiple boards and commissions to enable vulnerable peoples to speak for themselves in advocating for structural change. She is author of the book, The Land is Not Empty, Following Jesus in Dismantling the Doctrine of Discovery. Yes. And she is co-author with Sherry Hostetler of So We and Our Children May Live, Following Jesus in Confronting the Climate Crisis. That is a brilliant book. I use it as a required book in one of my courses, and everyone should read it. Josias Viera Kaeté, a Black man of Kaeté Indigenous ancestry, is the founder and pastor of the We in Creation movement, a movement of evangelical environmentalists in Brazil seeking to build decolonial Christian eco-theology as a way of doing theology. The movement hosts the School of Eco-theology, a nationwide project for leaders of evangelical churches in Brazil. I would like to visit and learn from that school. He serves also on the pastoral team of the Iglesia Bautista in Coqueiral, which is un barrio of Recife in Brazil. Dr. Viera Kaeté holds a master's degree in theology and a PhD in religious sciences from the Catholic University of Pernambuco, and he holds a specialization in environmental and cultural education. A theologian by training and a decolonial ecologist by conversion, he is a collaborator at the Martin Luther King Jr. School of Faith and Politics and takes part in a number of groups such as the Post-Colonial Research Group. Josias is married to Jessica Diaz and is the father of Luana Viera Kaeté. It is our great honor and our delight to host these two leaders and to learn from their wisdom. They will be interviewed by Reverend Dr. Nedy Astudillo, who is the coordinator of the Spanish Language Certificate in Climate Justice and Faith here at Pacific Lutheran Theological Seminary, and Reverend Dr. Cheryl Johnson, who serves as coordinator of the Certificate in Racial Justice and Faith, also a program at PLTS. So, Doctors Astudillo and Johnson, take it away for us.
Muchas gracias, Cynthia. Una petición para Sarah Berg para poder comenzar a grabar también en español, por favor. Gracias.
And Sarah, you have that petition?
Okay, I just took it away. You should be able to record.
Good.
Good. Okay.
Beautiful.
Thank you so much, Cynthia, for that
your
beautiful welcoming and situating us in time and in our community that's going to be discussing today. As we continue to get started, we've prepared several questions that Sarah and Josias will be responding to. So perhaps I'll ask Josias to respond first this time. But to begin, we just wanted to hear a bit more from each of you about your context. So to introduce us to your land, to its peoples, to the communities of all life, all creation, all species. And perhaps on a more personal level, if you'd like to share, if there's a pivotal moment in your life that brought you into this work at the intersection of climate and racial justice. So Josias, I would like to invite you, if you would be willing to share first, to introduce us to your context and to your story a bit more.
Ya puedo. Ok. Bueno, pido permiso inicialmente para hacer una saudación en mi lenguaje materna, que es el tupí. Entonces, tia pecoema opa oraporã ixé jurucaeté. Perdón a nuestras traductoras por eso. Bueno, yo hablé que es un buen día a todos y todas y a toda la creación. Mi nombre ancestral es Jurucaeté, pero que mi nombre occidental es Josias Viera. Gostaria inicialmente de dar muchas gracias a Nedy, mi hermana querida, que invitó a estar acá con vosotros y vosotras. Y a
First, I would
todas
like
las
to ask
otras
permission
personas que estoy a conocer hoy.
because I want
Y
to make a
mi
prayer
hermana
to be
pariente
in my
Sarah,
mother language.
pariente de otro pueblo, pero que los pueblos indígenas son parte de una misma familia. Entonces, saudações ancestrales,
Sorry for
hermana
our
querida.
interpreters for that.
Bueno, yo para responder la primera pregunta,
Said that
como es
I said good
mi
morning to everyone
contexto,
and also
como
good
yo
morning to all the
apresentaría mi
creation. My ancestral
tierra.
name is Jurucaeté.
Bien, yo me presentaría como
hope
un
that my
hijo de
Western
la
name,
Mata Atlántica con el
of course, my
Océano
Western name is
Atlántico.
Josias Viera.
Soy de la ciudad de Recife, del estado del Pernambuco,
So first, I
en
want to thank
Brasil,
Nedy,
que
my
en
sister, dear
siglo
sister, who
XIX
invited me
se
here to
tornó
be
un
here with us
país
with
pero
you,
que
and
por
all the other
mucho
people
poquito tiempo,
that I
por
have
ter
just met
sido
today, and also
suplantado,
Sarah, my
oprimido
sister,
por
also,
el Estado brasileño,
sister from
que es
another people, but of
desde
course the indigenous
su
people are all part of
construcción
the
es
same family.
Estado colonial. ¿No?
So
Mi pueblo
also,
Kaeté
greetings,
es
ancestral
pueblo
greetings to you,
ancestral de este
my dear sister.
territorio del el litoral,
So in order to
le
answer
dice hijo
to
de la
the
mata
first question,
atlántica con el
what the
océano
context
Atlántico,
is, how would I would
y
present
mucho
my
lutó
land?
contra el colonialismo, pero
First,
que
I am
nosotros
a son
fomos
of the
oprimidos por la fuerza de Estado.
Atlantic Ocean. I'm from the
Y
city of
muchos
Recife
de
in the
nosotros
state
fueron
of
muertos y
Pernambuco
muertas
in Brazil.
en el siglo XVII. Yo soy
And
un
on the 19th
remaneciente de
century,
muchas personas que
it
están
became a country, but for a
dispersas
very short
por el
time,
territorio. Mas nosotros estamos aquí, estamos vivos, por
because
eso
it
el
was
pueblo
oppressed
Kaeté está
by
vivo.
the Brazilian state,
Mi ciudad es cortada por 3 ríos
which is a
que
colonial
son
state.
el río Beberibe,
So
el
my people,
río
Kaeté, is an
Capibaribe
ancestral
y el
people
río
from this land,
Terripió.
from
Y
the littoral.
tenemos una
Of
brincadeira
course, I am
donde
a
decimos
son
que
of
el
the
océano Atlántico
Atlantic
es
land and
formado
of the
pelo
Atlantic
encuentro
Ocean,
de los
and
ríos
it fought a lot
Beberibe y
against
Capibaribe.
colonialism, my
Entonces,
land, but we were oppressed by
solamente por conta
the
desses 2
forces of the
ríos
state,
es que el océano Atlántico
and
existe.
many of
Es
us
una brincadeira de mi pueblo,
passed
obvio.
away
Entonces,
in the 17th
mi cidade
century,
tiene
and just the remnant
488
from many
años
people who are
y está
spread
estabelecida dentro
in the
del
territory.
territorio Caeté,
But
que
we are
es
here,
una
we are
parte da
alive,
gran nación
and this is why
Tupinambá.
the Kaeté people
Nosotros
are
en
still
Recife
alive.
somos
So the
pueblo
city
mucho
is
rico
3
en
rivers pass
cultura
through my city,
multicultural, o
which
sea,
is Beberibe
tenemos
River,
una cultura riquísima
Capibaribe
en
River,
música,
and
manifestaciones
Teipio.
de la calle, las artes plásticas. Somos
And of
formados
course, we have this
majoritariamente
joke where
por
we say that the
pueblos
Atlantic
negros e
Ocean
indígenas
is
y
formed
por
by
eso
but
vítimas
this
de
meeting
uma
of the
enorme
river Beberibe and
disparidade,
Capibaribe.
distância econômica entre
So
os
only because
mais
of those
ricos
rivers
e os
is
mais
why the Atlantic
pobres.
Ocean exists.
Mas
This is
os
just a joke
que
from my
são mais
people, of course.
pobres
My city
financeiramente
has
são
4
e são
centers,
massacrados
and
por
for
eles
408
ricos,
years.
são
It is
quem tem
established
a
within the Kaeté
possibilidade de
territory, which
experimentar
is a
a
part of the big
relação
nation
com o
Tupinambá.
território.
In
Os
Recife,
ricos
we are
não
a
querem,
people
solo querem
that
para
are very
hacer
rich in
de la tierra
culture,
mercadoria.
multicultural.
Pero que los
We
pueblos
have a very rich
experimentan dos
culture
cosas:
in music,
la relación con
in
el territorio
street
y en
manifestations,
contrapartida
plastic
el
art.
racismo religioso
We are
y
formed
ambiental.
by also Black people and indigenous people. We
Nuestro
are
bioma
victims
es
of
muy
a
diverso.
big
Tenemos
disparity and
muchos
economic
árboles,
disparity
muchas
between
ervas
the rich
que
people and the
ofrecen,
poorest
que
people.
nos donan cura para el cuerpo
The
y la
people who are
alma.
the poorest
En nuestra fauna
financially
tenemos una
are
gran diversidad
massacred
de
by
animales,
the rich,
muchos
and they have the
ameaçados
possibility of
en vía
experiencing
de
the
extinción, otros
relationship
tentando
with the land.
resurgir. En la Mata Atlántica,
The rich
sobretudo,
people, they don't want
tenemos
that. They just
en
want
la
to
ciudad de
make it a
Paudalho,
commodity,
es una
make the
ciudad
land a
muy
commodity. But
próxima
the
a mi
people are
ciudad.
experiencing two things: the relationship with the
Tenemos
land
lo último fragmento de
and
Mata
also the
Atlântica
religious
preservada.
racism
E
and
gostaria de
environmental racism.
aproveitar esta oportunidade para
Our
denunciar
biome is very
lo gran
diverse.
intento
We have a lot
de
of
el ejército
herbs and
brasileño
trees
que tenta deflorestar
that are
este
providing
fragmento
healing
para
for
la
our body and our
construção
soul.
de complexo militar.
And in our
Esto
fauna, we have a big
significa
diversity of
matar
animals.
las nascentes de ríos,
Many of them have
impossibilitar
been
que os mais
threatened and
pobres
are
tenham acesso
about to be
à
extinct. Some of
água
them are trying
e
to
também deflorestando,
rise again.
matar umas
Of course, in
centenas
the
de
city we have
espécies
in
que tentam
Paudalho, which
ressurgir
is
de
a
la
city that
extinção.
is
Então,
close to my
o
city.
Estado brasileiro hoje hace uma
We have
grande
the last
violência
part
contra a
of Mata
natureza
Atlântica.
por deflorestar
I would
200
like to
mil
take advantage of this
árboles
opportunity to
en el
denounce
fragmento de Mata Atlântica em
this
Pernambuco.
big attempt
Eso junto con el gobierno
of the
estadual de
Brazilian
Pernambuco
army
y el
who
ejército
is trying
brasileño.
to
Entonces, muchas gracias por estar
to
aquí y me ouvirem
do some
hacer
deforestation in
esa
order to
denúncia.
construct
Pido
a military
fuertemente
complex.
que
So this means
haçam
killing
nosotras
the water
podamos hacer
springs,
con que esta
also to make it
denuncia
impossible for the poor to have
pueda
access to
accesar
water,
muchas otras personas, para que nós
and
não
also
passemos por isso e possamos
killing hundreds of
proteger nossa
species
madre tierra.
that are trying to
Perdón por
come
la
out
emoción
of
con eso.
extinction. So the Brazilian state
Nosso pueblo es, como dice,
is
majoritariamente
doing great
descendente
violence
de
against
pueblos
nature,
ancestrales y habitan esta tierra.
deforesting
Foram
200,000 trees in this
tiveram
part
su
of
terra
Mata Atlántica in
roubada
Pernambuco.
para el
This
pueblo,
together
los
with
pueblos
the government of
indígenas y
Pernambuco and the
también
Brazilian
somos
army.
nosotros
So
compostos de
thank you very much
pueblos
for being
que
here,
fueron
and thank you for allowing
sequestrados
me
de
to
África, sobretudo
denounce
pueblos
this,
bantos, nagôs, auxás y jeje. Entonces, mi
this
tierra
claim
es nuestra
can get to
condición
more
hoy.
people,
Estoy
so that we don't
trabajando con mis hermanos y
go
mis
through this
hermanas
and we can
junto
protect the
a
Mother Earth.
algunas
I'm
poblaciones
sorry for my excitement
donde
and
se
my emotion.
sufre con la
Our
incidencia
people
de
is
especulación inmobiliaria que
we
hace con
descend
que
from
los
ancestral
ríos
people,
en los
and our
períodos de la
land,
lluvia transborden y las personas que
the
no
land was
tienen donde
stolen
morar
from them,
tengan sus casas
from the
destruidas,
indigenous
sus
people,
vidas
and also
enteras y
we are
perdan todo que lo tienen.
composed
Entonces,
from people
voy
who were
parar aquí
kidnapped
para que mi
from
hermana
Africa,
Sara pueda hablar también sobre
especially
su territorio, mi
Bantos,
parenta.
Nagús, Auxás,
Gracias.
y Ejeje.
Yes, thank you. Thank you for
So
introducing
my
us
land
to the richness, the beauty, and also
is
the
this is the
struggles of
condition
this
today.
moment.
I am
Sarah,
working
I would
with
love
my
to hear
brothers
from
and
you as well.
sisters together
Thank
with
you.
some
And
populations
I want to thank you,
where we
Josias,
are
for
suffering
your comments.
from this
I'm
incident
so
and
grateful, my brother.
speculation,
You have ignited passion in me
because
also.
the rivers in the rainy
I
seasons,
want to introduce
they
the land of my people,
the
which
people don't
we call the United
the
States
people's homes are
now.
destroyed because of the
I
rivers,
want
the
to
growth of
introduce
the
it
rivers
to
and
people
during the
who
rainy
haven't
season.
grown up in this context.
So I'm going to stop here
And
so that
also to
my
people who
sister
have
Sarah
grown
can
up in this
also talk about
context.
her territory.
There are more than
Thank you.
570 federally recognized tribes in the United States, which is to say that all of the United States is Indian country. And yet most people in the United States grow up knowing nothing about this. In fact, more than 570 peoples have federal recognition, that is recognition from our federal government, but many, many more than that do not have federal recognition. We are a nation full of indigenous peoples, each one with its own language and cosmology and culture. The process of settler colonialism is like this. A nation comes in and displaces a civilization that's already there and then denies its existence. And that is very much the process that is ongoing as a matter of law and policy in the United States. I grew up in Albuquerque, New Mexico. My people, the Tewa people, are from the territory we now call Northern New Mexico. I grew up in the big city of that region, like most Native Americans today. In fact, 70% of us reside in urban areas. In 1970, just 45% of us lived in urban areas. In 1970, that's the generation in which I was born. In 1945, the generation of my father, just 4% of us lived in urban areas. The legal and policy structure in the United States is designed to remove indigenous people from our lands. And that is a policy incentive that is ongoing. And yet land and water protectors in the United States and across North America are indigenous. It's indigenous peoples that are rising up to protect our sacred lands and waters, not just for ourselves and our descendants and on behalf of our ancestors, but for everyone. So as the United States empire removes us from our lands in order to better pursue natural resources that are on our lands, they are also displacing the hope and the energy for all people in our country to stave off disaster. That is the disaster of ecological overshoot. And I'll talk more about that in a moment. But ecological overshoot is the process of consuming what we call resources from the earth and stripping our life support systems, the life support systems that we depend on, all life, all human beings, all the four-leggeds, all the mammals, all the birds, all of us depend on these life support systems, and we are consuming them faster than they can replenish themselves. And climate change is just an outcome of that. So I think the question also asked if there was a pivotal moment for me, and there was a pivotal moment. I began my career on a multidisciplinary research team in Suriname, South America. And in my role on that research team, I was the one social scientist there. And I was really there to help smooth the process between the scientific team and the people that were living in communities there in the interior region of Suriname. And I came across an elder there at a meeting. It was an all-day meeting. It's outside of the tropics, quite warm, and working with translators to connect our scientific team. They were working on the impacts of gold mining on indigenous populations. So I'm trying to negotiate communication between them and the community members alongside multiple translators. And this elder walked up to me and she kind of thumped me on the chest and said, "Are you going to fight with us?" And she wasn't looking at the leader of the research team. She wasn't looking at all these PhDs and experts. She was looking at me. And that was shocking to me because I thought, well, what are you talking to me for? You know, I'm just a hired help. And she said, "Help us or go away." And I realized she's talking to me because I'm the one person here that she can identify as a person, an indigenous person. And so I told her, well, I don't know what I can do, but I'll help you. I commit to helping. And that commitment has shaped my entire life. That commitment was really around following the money trail for how corporations and foreign entities could come and extract resources on indigenous people's lands, completely decimate those lands, which leads to death and disability, massive health impacts on indigenous populations without any need for redress, following that money trail. And on that trail, it became clear that all indigenous peoples on all continents face the same devastation. All of that is completely legal, and that climate change is a part of that. I'll end there. Thank you.
Gracias, gracias, Sarah, y
May
gracias.
I, Nettie, could
Oh,
I
yes.
ask you very quickly before we go on, could I ask you to briefly tell newcomers how to access the translation when Josias speaks? Or when
Sí.
anyone speaks, how newcomers can access the
Cómo no,
translation?
seguro sí. A las personas que recién han llegado, en la parte inferior derecha ustedes van a encontrar un globo y allí si hacen clic allí encontrarán dos opciones para escuchar en español o para escuchar en inglés. Así entonces pueden tener acceso a la interpretación. Gracias, Cintia. Bueno, y gracias a Sarah y a Josias por ya irnos adentrando al tema de cómo se puede experimentar y se vive el colonialismo y el racismo en las estructuras sociales y también ahora en las raíces de la crisis ambiental y climática. Para hacer la próxima pregunta me gustaría compartir una cita de la profesora Cintia Moilovida aquí con nosotros en nuestra llamada, que me abre los ojos
Yeah, to
cada
the
vez que la
people who
escucho
just
y me
join
ayuda a
us,
enfocar este
you will
tema.
see
En el
at the
libro
bottom a
Eco-reforma o
globe for the
Eco-reformation,
interpretation, and
ella
there you can
dice,
click
el cambio
and you can
climático puede ser
select
la
the language
manifestación
that you
de mayor
prefer.
alcance del privilegio
Thank you,
blanco
Cynthia.
y del privilegio de clase
Okay, and
que haya
thank you,
enfrentado hasta
Sarah
ahora
and
la humanidad.
Josias, for
El cambio
introducing
climático está
us to
causado
the
en su
topic
inmensa mayoría
of
por las
how
personas que
they
más
live the
consumen en el
racism and
mundo y
colonialism
que
in their
desproporcionalmente
context, and
descienden de
also
Europa.
about the roots of our
Entonces, para
climate
comprender esta
crisis
realidad desde
that
su
we are living.
contexto,
So for the
pudieran
next
compartir, por
question,
favor,
I
cómo
would
se vive esta
like
realidad del
to
colonialismo y el racismo
share
en la
a
crisis ambiental
quote
y climática en sus
that
contextos
has opened my
y tal
eyes
vez
every
hasta
time
en
that
las
I
soluciones
listen to,
propuestas por la
and it
economía
helps me
verde
to
que
focus on
proviene
this
de
theme.
las
In
culturas
the
que consumen y quieren seguir
Eco-Reformation book,
consumiendo
she
más y
says
más
that the
en el
climate
mundo.
change is the
Le voy a dar la
manifestation
oportunidad tal vez a
of
Josias primero y luego a Sarah.
the
Gracias.
greatest white privilege
Gracias,
and
hermana. Es una
class as
pregunta
well
buena y
that
muy
humanity
compleja.
has
Muy
faced.
complexa, ¿no?
The climate change
Porque
is caused by
estamos
the
diante de
majority,
un mundo muy
by the
complexo.
people who
Pero que
consume the
antes
most,
de hablar al
and that
respecto, yo no hablé sobre
disproportionately
cómo
affect
yo
the rest of
tengo
us. So to
el
understand this
movimiento decidido, ¿no?
reality
En
in
mi
your
caminada.
context, could
Entonces
you
voy
share with us how do
responder
you
a esta
live
cuestión
this
con un poquito de esa otra,
racism
porque
and
trabajar
colonialism
la justicia,
in your
sea
context,
ambiental
and
o
as well,
racial,
if
es
you
algo
can
inherente
share
a
about the
los
consequences of
que
the green
siguen a Jesús de Nazaret.
economy that they want to keep on
No tengo
consuming.
mucho como
Monomar.
escapar
So
de la
Josiah,
persona del
I
pastor y de la persona del profesor, porque
give you the word.
siempre
Yeah,
busco un paso antes para poder hablar
this
de
is a
un
good
asunto.
question and a very
Entonces, para
complex
mí,
one,
me
because
posicionar
we live in a very complex
en la lucha
world.
contra el racismo
Before I
y
talk about
contra
this, I did not
la
talk
destrucción del medio ambiente es una
about
prerrogativa de quien
how
sigue a
my
Jesús.
movement is
Al
working in
menos
my journey.
es
So
lo que
I'm
se
also going to
espera
talk about
de
that,
las personas que
because
siguen a
when you
Jesús.
work
Mas
about
para allá
justice, whether it's
hay un
racial
proceso
of
que me fue
environmentalist,
levando a
is
entender eso
something
y ocurre en decorrencia de
inherent
la retomada
to
de
the
mi
people who
identidad
follow the
ancestral.
Jesus of
Yo
Nazareth,
vengo, como
and I
dice, como
can't
un hombre negro de ancestralidad indígena
live two
Kaeté.
different lives as a
Entiendo que mi
pastor
lucha
and as a
por
teacher,
justicia
because
sigue
for me
el
it's the same
proceso
thing.
por lo
My
cual
position
pasaron mis
in
ancestrales
this fight
que
against
vivían en armonía en
racism
la creación,
and the
por ver su
destruction
madre
of
tierra
our
ser
environment
destruida,
is a
necesitaban
prerogative
luchar
of the
contra
people who
eso.
follow Jesus.
Entonces, eso
This is what is
mi
expected
punto
from the people who
começa en mi
follow Jesus
infancia
Christ.
mirando mi abuela y mi
And
abuelo
that is a
lidando con la
process that
tierra
took
y
me to
comprendiendo su
understand that.
relación armónica
And that's how
como
I
una
started
forma de
retaking
honrar
my
a
own
Dios.
identity, my ancestral
Cualquier coisa
identity.
que
I am a black
pudesse
man
destruir
with
eso es un
an
absurdo
indigenous
que
ancestry.
contradiz
And I understand
todo
that the fight
lo
for
que se puede
justice
aprender con el movimiento de
follows
Jesús. En proceso de
the process
articular
that my ancestors
la
went
conexión
through,
entre
and who
racismo,
used to live
colonialismo,
in
devastación
harmony with
ecológica
nature,
en el
and what
contexto.
they went through when
Infelizmente,
they
como
saw
cristiano, no
their land
puedo
being destroyed, they felt the need
cerrar mis
to fight
ojos
for it.
para el fato
And
de que
that
el
is my
cristianismo
point. It
moldó
starts in my infancy, in my
el
childhood,
Occidente.
seeing my
Y ese moldar,
grandparents
ese formatar
fighting
Occidente
for
se deu
this
a partir
land
de la
and seeing
premissa
how
de, por
they
exemplo,
lived in
hoy
harmony, and yet they had to fight
denominarmos
for
la
this land
teología
being
del
destroyed.
domínio. Eso es un gran problema que para mí, de punto de vista teológico,
So yeah, this it's a call for the ones who follow
pone a
Jesus.
formatar el mundo que vivemos. Cuando el
How you
cristianismo
link
que
to
formató
how
el
you link
Occidente
racism and
tiene
colonialism and the
como
destruction of the
premisa
land in
dominar
this context.
todas las
First of all, as
cosas,
a Christian, I
dominar
cannot
a partir de la
go blind and
exploración.
close my eyes
Eso hace con
And
que
and
no
I have to
solamente
say
la
that
tierra, como
Christianism
si era poco, no
form
es
and
poco,
mold
mas no solamente la
the
tierra, como las
West, the
personas,
Western
como el
world.
cuerpo de las personas no blancas. Entonces, la
For example,
exploración
we
de
talk
la
about
tierra
the
y la
theology of
exploración de
domination.
los cuerpos de las
And this is
personas
a
no
big
blancas
problem from a
como
theological point of view.
una forma ainda más extrema. El cuerpo de la mujer son desdobramientos
When
del colonialismo. Porque para el colonialismo,
when the
todo lo
Christianism
que se
has as a
aproxima
premise
del
to
natural
dominate
es algo a
everything
ser
from the times of
explorado.
exploration,
Entonces, así
that
es el cuerpo de
causes
la
not
mujer,
only
el cuerpo
that
de
the
las
land
personas no blancas, los cuerpos
and the people
dentro del
and the
grupo de
bodies
las
of the
personas no
peoples
blancas,
that are
los
not
pueblos
white,
indígenas. Tenemos
the
en Brasil
exploration of
una
land
persona que
and the
representa un
exploration
movimiento
of
que si fuera
the
el
bodies
expresidente,
of
que
non-white
hace una
people.
charla que dice que los pueblos indígenas están
It's an
sentados
extreme
sobre una riqueza de minérios. Con eso, ello quiere decir que
these are the
los pueblos
result of the
tienen que ser
colonialism, all
sacados
of
de
this
lá para
abuse
que esa
and
riqueza
destruction,
sea
because
explorada.
for
Pero
colonialism,
que no
everything
pasa
that
por
is
la cabeza, la
close to
mente de
nature
esas personas,
needs
porque
to
no cabe
be
dentro de su
exploited and
horizonte de
exploded and
interpretación,
explored. And
que
that's how
no
they
es
treat
minerio, no
the
es
bodies,
riqueza,
the human
es la
bodies
tierra,
of
es lo
non-white
cuerpo
people,
de
and
esas personas.
especially
Entonces, no se
women
tira ninguém de
and the
su cuerpo.
indigenous people as well.
Entonces,
In
articular eso
Brazil,
es
we have one person who represents a movement
continuado.
that
El
was the
racismo y la
ex-president, and
devastación
he
del medio
had a meeting
ambiente
where
es
he
un
said that the
desdobramiento
indigenous
del
people
colonialismo.
is sitting on top of
Entonces,
a
yo
richness
podría
of
hablar muchas
resources. So
personas,
that means that they
filósofos,
need
pensadores
to
europeos cristianos
displace and get rid
que
of those indigenous
legitimaron
people so that this
el
richness
pensamiento
can be
de
explored.
la
But something that
teología
they don't
de
think
la
about because it's
dominación.
just they can't even
Y
interpret or
tenemos
think
una
about
infinidad
this, that
de
is not
personas.
about the
La forma
extraction, it's
que
not about the
nosotros
resources. They're talking
podemos
about
hacer
human beings, talking about the bodies of people, but they
camino
can't even
es
think
haciendo
about
una
that. So to
reinterpretación
articulate that is a
de la fe.
continuous process that
Yo diría del
continues
cristianismo,
the
pero que es
racism
muy
and the
complexo, muy
devastation and
difícil
destruction
hacer
of
una separación de
of
cristianismo
nature
de
is a
exploración.
result
Es muy
of
difícil. Entonces
colonialism.
tenemos que
So
hacer
I
una
could talk about many
una
people,
nueva interpretación de la fe,
philosophers,
de la
thinkers, and
revelación,
Christian
para que nosotros
philosophers who
podamos nos
gave
encontrar nuevamente con el
legitimacy to this
movimiento de Jesús,
thought
con
of
lo convite de
domination.
Dios a el ministerio de reconciliación. Entonces, la forma que
We
miro
have
que hace una
many
articulación es que
people.
el colonialismo es una origen de pensamiento, de exploración, y eso se desdobra en
So
la
we must
exploración
do a
de los cuerpos,
reinterpretation
de todo
of
lo que es
faith,
diferente
of
de arquetipo
Christianism, I would say
blanco,
real, but it's
hombre
really
y
very
eurocentrado.
complex to separate
Gracias.
Christianism and exploration.
Gracias,
It's
Josias.
very
Sara,
difficult.
adelante.
So we need to
Gracias.
make a new interpretation of faith, what faith means, and
Thank you. So
so that
the
we
connection
can
between
get together again and reunite with the movement of
you
Jesus
asked,
Christ, with the ministry of reconciliation.
racism, colonialism,
What I
and
see
ecological
is that
devastation.
colonialism
So everything
it's an
comes from this logic
origin
of extraction,
thought and
we call this logic
exploration,
of extraction
and
colonialism.
this
It's the idea
brings as a
that
result
Josias
the
was just talking
exploration
about,
of bodies
that
and anything that
someone
is
empowered
different of
to have
being a
dominion over
non-white
everything,
and a man.
and that the earth
you.
and its life support systems
Thank you, Josiah. Sarah, please, you can go ahead.
are really just raw resources that can be turned into a commodity at the whim of those people who have the authority to overtake that. They have the authority to say, this is my stuff, and I'm going to transform this stuff so that I can be enriched. I myself, my kin, my descendants will be enriched. And so that we call colonialism. And it is racist in its intent and in the way that it's manifested. The doctrine of discovery, which is a body of law and policy that shaped international law, certainly law in the United States, designated Christian monarchs as the only ones empowered by God to come into lands that were previously undiscovered and to have dominion over those lands completely, complete sovereignty over those lands, to the devastation of the people, the original peoples of those lands, the indigenous peoples. And the way that that demonstrates itself today is numerous. In the United States, indigenous peoples have the lowest ranking in every single indicator that you can find for well-being. We have the lowest life expectancy. We have the highest maternal and child death. We have the lowest home ownership. We have the highest rates of suicide, the highest rates of risk for drug and alcohol abuse, all indications of a policy incentive to remove indigenous peoples from our lands. And so this is not, many of you be asking, what does this have to do with climate justice? But I'm going to tell you, this is, indigenous justice is climate justice. So, you know, the climate crisis that we're in now is a manifestation or a symptom of this extractive logic, this logic that says everything that is here is for those of us in power to consume to our heart's content without any regard for the people of the future, for those people that are vulnerable around us, or even for the earth itself. And so the reason I want to bring that up is because in the United States, as we are seeking solutions to climate crisis, we're using the same extractive logic to say, how do we solve this problem? Oh, cars are causing too much carbon to go into the atmosphere. What we need are better cars, which is a kind of insanity in hypnosis. What we have is a complex society, 330 million people who need transportation systems. But why would the solution to too many cars be more cars? I cannot understand that. So we're going to create more cars. The Guardian magazine says that the US demand for lithium is going to be 3 times the global demand in a short period of time. And so where does that lithium come from? This is the impact on indigenous and vulnerable peoples. That lithium comes from the lands of indigenous people. People in that are in the Andes regions, the Andean Triangle, are already disappearing. They're being disappeared, and those activists, indigenous activists who are advocating for their lands, are already being disappeared and arrested and imprisoned for the process of protecting their own homelands. This is also the case in the United States. Where is the copper for all of these electric cars coming from? From the lands of indigenous peoples. And so I've actually been in meetings with Christians who have said to me, well, Sarah, you know, this is the end of the world, so indigenous people are going to have to take one for the team. We're just going to have to be able to take these minerals so that we can save the world. What kind of thinking is this? You're going to damage the aquifers and the sacred lands of our people so that you can build cars? How is that saving the universe? We have to imagine a reversal of this logic, which is the logic of uncreation. We hear in Romans chapter 1 that the divine nature of the Creator And the divine, that creator's eternal power is demonstrated in creation itself, so that we are without excuse. That's what it says in Romans chapter 1. We understand the nature of the creator through, as it is expressed in creation itself. What is that? Faithfulness, cyclical, integration, mutual dependence, all of these life support systems working together that we are a part of. We're part of it, and we're not the center. Every one of us, everything we do matters, and we're not the center. That's what we see. Those are the cycles of life we see in creation. And yet we continue as a society to pursue a linear, reductive, extractive logic that is hurting Indigenous people and vulnerable people first, but will ultimately lead to the demise of us all. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Sarah and Josias, and so much synergy, yet different nuance in what you both have shared. So helpful, so helpful. I just wanted to pause to note that I see some questions starting to come in the Q&A area. So please do post in English or Spanish any questions you have, and we hope to get to those at the end. Moving forward, and this time maybe I'll ask you first, Sarah, just to mix things up. We want to really emphasize that Indigenous communities are, as you've already named, are not merely victims, but are very much on the front line of the resistance to colonialism and to climate change. So we just wanted you both to reflect a little bit more about the resistance to climate change and how that's emerging in your context, both in terms of practicalities, but also to look perhaps at the traditions, the wisdom, the spirituality that folks are drawing on in that resistance. You can speak personally, you can speak about movements. Please answer as it feels right. Sarah, I'd like to invite you to go first.
Our movement is the Coalition to Dismantle the Doctrine of Discovery. You can find us at dismantlediscovery.org. This is a movement for everyone. Please join us. It's not a metaphor. We really mean to dismantle the legal and policy structure that is dominating all people and the earth. In the cosmology that I've learned from my elders, I've been taught that the very first thing that I do in the morning when I wake up, this morning and every morning, when I'm still a little bit dazed and I'm not quite awake and I haven't even put my feet on the ground yet, to give thanks for the breath that's entering my body as soon as I'm conscious of it, because that breath is the animator, the great animator that is entering my body, that I am being animated by the great animator in the sacred relationship of life. In the morning, I go downstairs and have a cup of coffee and stand outside on my patio and pray at dawn, as I've been instructed to do and my people have done for tens of thousands of years. And in that space, I am acknowledging with reverence the creation that surrounds me. That's not a sentimental opportunity for me to just sort of wax philosophical. What I'm doing is acknowledging the trees right there in my little postage stamp size yard in the city where I live, that they are creating the oxygen that I need to breathe. And acknowledging that the creator is actually not abstract and separate, but available to us in the soil, right there in the soil. The Naga people and Indigenous people in India, they have more than a dozen festivals for seeds every year. And they say the creator, the name of the creator is the one who goes down into the soil with the seed. That every time germination occurs, the creator is enabling that germination to occur. We are in a web of interdependence. The insects that are in my backyard are making it possible for reproduction to happen for the plants and trees that we need to feed the soil. we understand that we don't really even fully understand how soil works. All of the aspects of what I've been taught to call the invisible ones that make it possible for us to grow food, or for food to grow, that we are in a symbiotic relationship. And that is not something to be celebrated once a week, but actually to be acknowledged with reverence every single day, and in the first moment of consciousness, and in the last moments of consciousness, and all day long, that we are in a relationship of interdependence with the earth itself. Wenzel Nosey, who's the leader of Apache Stronghold, that's an Apache resistance to the decimation of Oak Flat, a sacred ground that is being exploited for copper, says that the beginning of all resistance is prayer. And that is certainly what I have learned from my elders as well. And that prayer is an acknowledgement every single day that I am part of systems of life. I am not separate. I have no dominion. I am interdependent. I am a fragile being that depends on these life support systems of air, sacred water, and soil. And so is everybody else. That for me is the beginning of resistance. That's the beginning of resistance, that acknowledgement together of reality, not a reality that's constructed and controlled by us, but the reality of the earth and its life support systems that enables all life. Thank you.
Thank you, Sarah. So beautiful. Josias, love to hear from you.
Bueno, enquanto Sarah hablaba, yo pensaba sobre todo eso y hablar sobre de dónde surge la resistencia y de dónde busco, en qué tradiciones busco esa fuerza para resistir. Me vem à memória lo que o Papa Francisco hablaba quando percebia los descartados de la tierra. Con este término, el Papa miraba a las personas y también los seres no humanos que pasan por
When Sarah
una
was talking, I was
condición
thinking about all of
desproporcional
that
de resistir. Y yo
to
penso
talk
que
about
no es
where the
el
resistance comes
cambio
from
climático, pero que sí a la crisis climática,
and which
porque el
traditions,
cambio,
in which
para
tradition should I
mí,
look for
me parece que es el
that
clima que está
strength
mudando y no
to
es.
resist?
La crisis está siendo una consecuencia de las
Pope
acciones
Francis
humanas en
would
cuanto
say
a
when he was
agente de destrucción.
perceiving,
Entonces, ¿cómo resistir a las crisis
he was saying
climáticas?
the
Yo
outcasts
penso
of
que es
the
proceso
earth.
totalmente desproporcional.
He was
Eso me
the people
hace
who were discarded
pensar
from the
que
earth, the human beings
yo particularmente no tengo
that
ninguna
go through
esperanza
a
en los
disproportional
gobiernos
condition of
establecidos,
resisting.
cualquiera que sean.
And I
Nem
think that it's
los
not
que
climate
buscan
change,
poder
but it's the
para
climate crisis.
alcanzar el gobierno.
Because the
Siempre
change,
que
for me,
penso en el
it seems
poder,
that
penso
it's
en la
the climate,
exploración. Y no es eso
the
que va a
crisis is
nos
a
livrar de los
consequence
problemas
of the human
que vienen de
actions
las crisis climáticas.
as far as
Pero que
as an agent of destruction.
digo isso porque
So
los
how to
estados,
resist
naciones
the climate
estructuran
crises?
sus
I think that it is a
en
process that
torno
is
del poder
completely
financeiro.
disproportional.
Eso se establece
It
na
makes me
exploración
think
de la naturaleza, algo que no tiene a ver con
that I
el
particularly do not
término
have any
economía.
hopes
El
in
término
the governments
economía
that are
tiene
established,
otro significado,
whichever
que
government it
es
is,
las reglas
not even the
de la
ones
casa
looking for
común.
power
Y no
to
tienen que
get
ver
to the
con la
government.
relación financiera,
Every time
pero
that I
que
think
esta
about
palabra
power, I think
tem
about
sido corrompida para el
exploration.
pensamiento financiero, ¿no?
It's not that
De
they're
modo
going
que
to
también
free
no
us
tengo
from
ninguna
the problems,
esperanza en los eventos que
from
tienen
the climate
un
crises.
verniz ambiental y sean
And I
propostos
say this
por
because
esa esfera, como
the actions
tenemos
are
visto,
structured around
los
financial
principais
power
financiadores son extremamente
that is
los
established in the
grandes
exploration of nature,
poluidores y exploradores de la
even though
creación.
it doesn't have nothing to
Entonces,
do with
de
the
un
term economy. The
punto
term
tenemos los
economy
gobiernos
has another meaning,
establecidos que tienen su mirada
which
en
is the rules
el
of the
desenvolvimiento, que
common
es
house. They
esencialmente
don't have
explorador.
nothing to do with
Do
the
otro lado,
financial
tenemos
relationship.
los grandes
That this
eventos
word
ambientales que tienen como
has been
financiadores
corrupted for
los
financial
grandes
thought, no?
poluidores.
So
Entonces,
I don't have any
yo no
hopes
tengo ninguna
also
esperanza
in the
en quien tiene
events that
poder.
have this
Yo tengo esperanza
environmental
en el pueblo de la tierra, en las resistencias que
sense.
se
So as we've
establecieron
seen, the main
históricamente
funders are
por defender la
extremely
tierra a
the
cual
great
sí
pollutants
pertenece. O
and
sea,
explorers
yo
of
pertenzo a
creation.
la tierra, no ella es una mercadería que me
So on one
pertenece.
side we have the
Yo
governments,
no
the established
miro
governments
la resistencia a
that
surgir.
are looking at
Yo
development,
veo
which is
la
essentially
resistencia a continuar.
an
La
explorer
lucha de
development, and
los
on the other
pueblos
side we have
indígenas
the
por
environmental movements that are being
preservar su
funded
tierra
by
ancestral,
the greatest
en la lucha de las
pollutants.
comunidades ribeirinhas, en
So I don't
manter
have any
el
hope
ecosistema equilibrado. Yo tengo
on the
esperanza
people who
en
hold
la
the power.
resistencia de
I
las
have hope
comunidades
in
quilombolas
the
que se
people
mantêm
from the
firmes
land, in the
desde la
resistances
colonización.
that are being established
Son,
historically,
para nosotros pueblos
that
indígenas, son
defend the land.
525 años acá, en
I
este
belong to
territorio
the
de
earth.
resistencia
It's
constante.
not a commodity that
Es
belongs to
una
me.
resistencia ancestral.
I
Do
look
mesmo
at
modo, eu
resistance
entendo que el proceso de
when
mi
resistance
espiritualidad, mi fé,
arises, I let it continue.
eu entendo
The
esse
struggle
processo a
of the
partir
indigenous people
do
for
Evangelho de
preserving
Jesus
their
y
ancestral
busco la
land
inspiración en el
is the fight
testimonio
of
de
the
lo Hijo de Dios
communities
sobre
in
tudo que
maintaining a
criou,
balanced
como
ecosystem.
indicou que deveríamos
I
nos
have hope
posicionar.
in the
Porém,
resistance of the
pero
communities, the
antes
quilombolas
de la fé
resistances
que
that are
se
firm
materializa
since the
en la
colonization.
religión cristiana. Yo soy
For
un
us,
hombre
these are
indígena
indigenous
en
people.
la
We have
retomada ancestral
525
y
years
en
here
la
of resistance, of
sabiduría
constant
ancestral.
resistance.
Yo encontro la
It is an
orientación
ancestral
necesaria para
resistance.
la
And in the
resistencia
same way, I
diante de
understand that the
los
process
avanzos
of
de la
my
degradación.
spirituality, my
Y
faith,
tento
I understand that
apresentar
process
esse
from the
processo
gospel
para nosso
of
espaço
Jesus, and I look
religioso de
for
fé
inspiration
cristiana,
in the
livre de
testimony
qualquer
of the
intenção
sons of God
proselitista, ou seja,
about
de
how
cambiar
he
a
created everything and how
religião cristiana
what is our
para
position.
uma, talvez, religião indígena, por isso não
But
existe,
before
mas de construir
faith being
aprendizados.
materialized
Com isso não estou
into a
dizendo que
Christian religion,
abro
I am an
manos
indigenous
de
person.
la espiritualidade em Jesus. Por contrário,
in the
em
wisdom,
Jesus,
in the
eu
ancestral
miro
wisdom, and there
el
is where I
Dios
find my
ancestral
orientation, my necessary
encarnado.
orientation
Deus é Deus
for the
Deus
resistance
ancestral.
before this
Isso porque percebo
progress
em la
of this
tradição
degradation.
indígena
And I'm
que
trying to
o Criador
present
já
this
se
process
relacionava de muitas formas
for our
desde
religious
de mis
space of
ancestros,
Christian faith,
como
free of
também
any
com mi pueblo en
attempts to
los
change the
bosques, las
Christian
florestas.
religion
Y
to
después
an
confirmo
indigenous
eso
religion.
con el fato de perceber en texto
But
bíblico
just to
cuando
build
el
knowledge.
autor de Hebreos en el capítulo 1 habla a
This is
respecto
why I'm
de
saying
lo
that
Dios
I open my
ancestral
hand on
que
the
ya
spirituality
hablaba
of Jesus. In
a los
Jesus,
antiguos
I see that
por
I see
intermedio
the
de
ancestral
los
God in the
profetas y
flesh.
de sus
God
ancestrales
is
y
an
hoy
ancestral God.
habla por su Hijo. Entonces, estamos hablando de
Because I
Dios
perceive
que
that in the
no
indigenous
se
tradition,
relaciona
the
con la
Creator
iglesia de agronegócio, de lo agronegócio.
was relating to us in different
Estamos
ways.
hablando de Dios que habla con las comunidades
from my ancestors,
empobrecidas, con las comunidades que se
as well as the people in
relacionam
the forest.
harmonicamente com a natureza. E
And
nos
then the fact
ensinam
that we
a
perceive
colher
this
a
in a
erva
biblical
que
text,
trata
when
nosso
the author
corpo.
of Hebrews
E
in
com
the chapter
isso
1, he talks
celebrar
about
em
the
todo o
ancestral God
processo de cultivo,
who was
de
talking
sembrar, de
to
cultivar,
the
e
people through
nos
the
ensina
prophets.
constantemente el camino de
And
la
today
resistencia a la
he is talking
crisis
through his son.
climática.
So we're talking
Se
about a
constrói com
God that is
harmonia
not
em la
related
criação.
with
Eu entendo como
the
espiritualidade, em
church,
palavras
but it is a
simples,
God
a
that
prática
talks to the
daquilo que
communities,
cremos.
with the
Se cremos
most
que
poor
Deus ama
communities,
todo el mundo criado,
the communities that
devemos amar o que
have
Ele
a
amou.
harmonious relationship
Compreendo
with
que
nature,
nadie
and
puede
they teach
defender
us how
nem
to
cuidar o que não ama.
gather the herbs
Isso
that
é
treats our
espiritualidade
bodies.
para mim. É o que tenho aprendido em las
So in
comunidades
every
indígenas. Eu
process
amo
of
a natureza porque sou
of
parte
planting,
dela.
of
E por ser
cultivating,
parte dela, eu vou defendê-la com minha vida.
they are
Eu vou
constantly
defender
teaching
a
us the
Madre
way
Tierra.
of
Eu vou
resistance to the
defender porque
climate
é
crisis,
em la Madre Tierra que o
which is
Deus
being
criador
built
de todas
with
as
harmony
coisas se
in
manifesta e se
creation.
apresenta. Então, é
I
aí
understand that
que eu
spirituality, in
consigo
simple
mirar esperança
words,
para seguir
is the practice
resistindo.
of what we believe in. If we believe in God, if we believe that God
Gracias,
loves
Josias,
everyone,
muchas gracias, Sarah.
if God loves
Um,
the entire world that was
Diana,
created.
han estado un poco respondiendo esta pregunta. Gracias por las otras
Nobody
preguntas
can
que ya se han
defend.
puesto en el chat, y Claudia por traducirlas
I cannot
al
understand why
otro
nobody is
idioma.
defending, because this is
Sarah y
spirituality.
Josias,
This
si
is
quieren ir
what I
viendo,
learned
ya
in the
próximamente
indigenous
vamos
communities. I
a
love nature
entrar
because I'm a part of it.
en tiempo
And
para
because I am part
compartir
of
sus
it, I'm going
respuestas a
to
estas
defend.
preguntas. Pero
I'm
la
going to
última
defend
entonces
Mother
que ahora
Earth.
tenemos tal vez
I'm going to
es
defend
cuáles son
because
sus
it is in
sueños
Mother Earth
y su
where the
mensaje
God
para las
creator of
iglesias
everything
y para los
is
creyentes,
manifesting.
tanto del norte global como del sur global,
So
cuando
this
pensamos
is
en crisis
where I look
climática,
for hope
racismo,
in order to
y
continue
colonización.
resisting.
Lo que deseen compartir y luego entonces
Thank you,
entramos en las
Josias. Thank you,
otras
Sarah.
preguntas.
Diana,
Tal vez si quieres Sara primero.
this question has been answered. Thank you for the other questions
¿Yo?
that are on the chat.
A ver, Sara primero.
Thank
Sí,
you, Claudia, for translating them
In the
to the other
coalition to
language.
dismantle
If
the
you want
doctrine of
to,
discovery, we see ourselves as the messengers to the church.
We're going to share your responses to these
messengers.
questions.
And
But
we're
then
calling
the
on
last one that
people
we
of
have
faith
now
to rise up
is,
and join
what
the
are your
movements
dreams and your
of
message
liberation for
the
Indigenous
churches
peoples, to join those
and for the
movements.
believers
We train and
from the global
prepare
north as well
and
as from the global
accompany
south
Christians,
when we talk about climate
particularly those that are
crisis, racism,
settler descended,
and
to join
colonization.
liberation movements that are already in process
Anything that
that
you
are
wish
led
to
by
share?
Indigenous peoples.
Maybe Sarah first.
My hope is in the movement of
Sarah,
ordinary women and
Sarah can
men
go first.
to acknowledge reality as it really is. We live in a closed system of mutual dependence, and to join together collectively to shape reality. I so agree with what Josias said. I don't have any hope in any government or in any large NGO or anyone that is peddling a short-term solution to a complex problem. We must rise up as the people of God and join our kin, our Indigenous kin, who are already defending sacred lands and waters. That call gives me hope. And the many, many, many people each day who join our movement also give me hope. As we put our bodies next to the bodies of Indigenous land and water protectors, we embody true solidarity. Solidarity is not clicking a button on a computer. It's not signing a petition. It's not sending a letter. It's putting our bodies side by side with those people who are our land and water protectors. Acknowledging not that we as Christians are good people with good intent who have excess time and money to share with the less fortunate. A way that we have behaved that ensures and reinforces power imbalance, but instead acknowledging that we are kin. We are interdependent and we are kin. And in that acknowledgement of a kinship relationship, we don't stand by and watch our kin be eradicated from the surface of the earth. Rather, we join side by side because the outcome is shared by us all. And that understanding is something that we accompany people in learning that and understanding that fully. And that is gives me great joy. And I want to close by saying the body of Christ is described by Jesus in parables as being salt and light. If you light a candle in a very dark room, no matter how large it is, that light goes to every corner of the room, even if it's tiny. And even a small amount of salt can make an entire meal salty and flavorful. We don't have to say, we can't join a movement until we know we're going to win. Rather, we lift up our lives and spend our lives in resistance, in joyful resistance of the principalities and powers of uncreation, together with our kin, with our indigenous kin. And in that process, we find life and life abundant. And that gives me hope. Thank you.
Muchas gracias. Con respecto a el papel de la iglesia y yo que puedo hablar para ella, yo gustaría de hacer una diferenciación, porque por iglesia tenemos dos cuerpos. Uno es la institución. Esa es humana, muy falla. Otra es el cuerpo de Jesús. Esa necesita seguir la cabeza, que es ello. Entonces, a respecto de la primera, yo tengo bastante tristeza porque mayoritariamente en Brasil,
with regards to the role of
la
the
iglesia
church,
viene haciendo un papel
and what I can
de
say
apoyar
to it,
la
I would like to
exploración de la
make this
creación
differentiation,
y
because by church
no
we
dando
have
conta
two
de su
bodies.
responsabilidad
One,
con el
which is the
racismo y
institution,
con la exploración de pueblos no blancos.
which is human,
Eso como mano de obra
and the other one is the body of
esclavizada
Jesus.
ao longo da história, que não pode ser esquecida, não pode ser olvidada.
So we need to follow
Bem como
the
de los
head, which is
pueblos
that.
oprimidos en la
So
contemporaneidad.
with regards to the
Por
first,
ejemplo, en la
I feel a
jornada
lot
de
of sadness
trabajo
because
exhaustiva y
in
sem
the majority of
garantía de
Brazil,
sus derechos de
mostly
forma
the
mínimamente
church has
razoável.
had a
Isso é muito
role
triste de
of
constatar.
supporting
E essa é
the
uma constatação
exploration of creation,
especificamente evidenciada por causa do neoliberalismo
and they are not
que
aware of
impera
their
sobre a
responsibility with
contemporaneidade,
racism
que mais se apresenta
and with the
como o
exploration of non-white people,
neocolonialismo exploratório e que é legitimado por grande
which are
parte
a
de
workforce
los cristianos e
that have been
cristianas
enslaved
que
throughout history, and
conduzem
this cannot be
suas
forgotten.
igrejas consigo e buscam poder.
The people who are
Porque
oppressed
miramos
now, for
acontecer
example,
en la dirección contraria,
the exhaustive
por parte
workload
es eso, por parte de la iglesia de
and
hoy.
their rights
Tem
are
sido una
minimally
excepción
complied with.
a
So this is
esta
very
regla,
sad.
infelizmente,
This is a
que se
verification
hace
which is
contrario a
very
eso.
evident
Podemos ver
because of the
este fenómeno en
neoliberalism
algunas iglesias
which
que
is
se posiciona.
which
Eu
has
não
been
puedo
presented as
tristemente hablar que
neocolonialism,
son las
which is
denominaciones
something that
cristianas,
explores
sino
and
que
that has
algunas
been
iglesias
legitimized
locales,
by many Christians
movimientos cristianos
that
que
drive their
entendem
churches
lo llamado del
and are looking
Creador
for power.
a conversión. Por eso lo que
What
puedo
what
decir para
we're
las
watching
iglesias
happen in the
tal vez
opposite
sea
direction
tal vez fosse
is
reproducir
that,
la
which is the
carta
church of
del
today.
pastor
There's an exception to the
Martin
rule,
Luther King Jr. para decir
or what do we
que
do
mi
against it?
sueño se alinha com
We
su
can see
sueño.
this phenomenon
Mas
in some
para allá
churches.
disso puedo decir que sin medo de
Sadly, I
qualquer
cannot say that
equívoco, eu sonho, mi sonho,
that these are Christian churches, but some
vai
churches, local
charla para la
churches,
iglesia, es que
Christian
el
movements
cuerpo de Cristo se
that
revele en la
understand the
tierra,
calling from the Creator.
evidenciando la gran iglesia de Jesús, su
What I
cuerpo,
can say to the
que
churches
actúa,
is maybe
que actúa para que podamos
maybe it would be
vivenciar
to
nuevos
reproduce
cielos y nueva
the letter
tierra
from
con todos los
Pastor
seres en la
Martin Luther
creación,
King Jr.
de forma que viramos para Isaías capítulo
to say
11.
that my dream
Yo
is
sonho con la
aligned with their
superación de la
dream.
opresión, sonho
But
con
beyond that,
el día en que
I
las
can say
chicas, los chicos negros indígenas
without
no
fear of
precisem
making a
bajar
mistake, my
sus
dream
cabezas, porque de ellas es el reino de Dios.
is that the
Yo
body
digo
of
eso para la
Christ
iglesia, porque si la
is
iglesia
revealed
escucha
on earth,
eso, la iglesia se converte.
revealing the great church of
Es mi gran
Jesus,
sueño.
its body, which
Gracias.
acts so that
Thank
we
you
can
both for those
experience
visions
new
and dreams
heavens
and
and the new
calls to
earth
action.
with all the beings in
Before we
creation.
move into our open Q&A, just wanted to take a moment to
So
ask Sarah
we go
and
to
Josias if you had
Isaiah
questions
chapter
for
11.
the others that you would like to ask.
I dream with overcoming repression, the day where the Black people and Indigenous people
All right. Oh,
I
Sarah, please.
don't need to
I don't have a question.
lower
Just
their
grateful
heads
to be here with you. What a blessing to get to be in the
because
same space with you.
the
Thank
kingdom
you.
of heaven is
Mhm.
theirs. So I say this to the church because if the church listens
Sim,
to that, then the church will
lo
be
mismo.
converted.
Estoy muy,
This
muy,
is my
muy grato
great
y muy
dream.
feliz
Thank
de
you.
estar aquí con ustedes. Por mí pasaríamos todo el día. Ok, muchas gracias por eso. Vamos a las preguntas.
Wonderful, wonderful. So yes, moving to our questions that have been posed. I'd like to begin with this first one from Coqueiral Stringer. I think it's a little bit more directed towards Sarah, but you're both welcome to respond. The question is, the reality of ecological overshoot and continued economic growth have been brought up here and also in Sarah's book. And this person would like to hear how to frame a moral economy and a theology of abundance in a context that puts such a high premium on
the same
extraction
thing.
and the
I
accumulation of
am
wealth.
very happy being here with you. If it is up to
Sarah,
me,
did you have
we
a
would be here
response?
all day long, but we can take now questions, of course.
Yeah, I mean, that's
Wonderful.
often a question that people ask. They want to know what an alternative economy is. And to that, I respond, such a thing comes out of the people. We have an opportunity to now partner with Indigenous peoples and Indigenous peoples' cosmologies to imagine and dream and build a world that does not yet exist. To that end, we embarked on a Indigenous systems thinker series where we interviewed Indigenous systems thinkers from the United States and Canada and Australia. That lecture series sits on our website. It gives us the opportunity to understand economy through the lens of Indigenous cosmology. We also assigned a team of Christians to sit with those interviews over time when they were happening, but then together as we're breaking these down for congregations to find a through line. What are we learning? What is the thing that we're learning from these Indigenous leaders, from these different communities across the world? One thing that I would share is it must be based on an assumption of interdependence. So there are two principles that I would bring forward. One is the idea that nothing can be done unless it is a benefit to all of creation. If you're making an economic decision, it has to be consulted through the lens of being a benefit to all of creation. And if it's not a benefit to all of creation, then it can't happen. Another way to put this, it's Sophie Pierre, who's a woman from British Columbia and tribal leader who focused on economic development. Another, a healer from Dene lands said it has to be win-win-win, win for me, win for you, win for the earth. If it isn't a win for all of us, then it can't happen. And so here is an idea that both of these elders brought forward that I think is so crucial. The idea of winning and losing is time bound. It's bound within time. So if I win and you lose, Cheryl, that's only in this instant, because a loss for you is ultimately a loss for me. There is no distance between us. We're connected. And we have to replace the logic of domination with a logic of kinship, which is reality, actually. That's the true reality. And I think finding these assumptions, we can then build an economy that prioritizes systems of care, which is what Tyson Yunkaporta, the intellectual and scholar from Australia, really revealed. That having, for example, health as an outcome is a foolish outcome. Why would we have health as an outcome? Every one of us is going to die. You know, once again, this sort of short-term thinking, instead of building systems of care so that we know that everyone will be cared for, regardless of where we are in our health journey, because every one of us is going to decline. If we can only acknowledge that and internalize that, this is an Indigenous way of thinking, that we're not striving for health, we're striving for well-being, that we find well-being in the collective and our community together and our collective, not just with other humans, but with all life. So there are some thoughts, maybe not very satisfying, but I also want to say the Coalition to Dismantle the Doctrine of Discovery is intent on finding and building, dreaming, finding, building a world that does not yet exist. So it's not passive, just sitting in an armchair saying, I wonder what. No, we are asking those questions every day and seeking to live out the answers.
Thank you. Those are very helpful guideposts. Would you like to respond as well to the question?
Si me escuchan a mí, puedo tratar de hacer la otra pregunta para Josias, entonces, que le dejas a Yara aquí en el chat. Ella dice, al principio mencionabas el concepto de racismo religioso. ¿Puedes decir algo más sobre eso? ¿Qué quiere decir? Y también sobre lo difícil que es desenredar la doctrina de la conquista del cristianismo. ¿Cómo ves que la teología decolonial ayuda o no a este proceso?
Bueno, es bueno que estamos a responder una pregunta por vez. Dios sea loado, porque las preguntas tienen una complejidad, entonces es mejor. Sí,
Okay, now we have
déjame
a
hablar
connection.
sobre la...
If you can listen
Primero,
to
gracias,
me.
Yara, por una pregunta tan
we
importante
have another
porque el racismo religioso tal vez no sea una
question.
realidad en todos los
You were talking
territorios que están
about
aquí hoy
racism
representados,
and
pero que
ecological
en Brasil
racism.
es
And can
una
you talk
realidad
about more?
muy,
Can you
muy
talk
fuerte,
about
muy fuerte.
getting rid
El
of
racismo religioso
the
es la postura
the-
en Brasil
how to
de
dismantle
los
the
cristianos y
colonialism
cristianas
theology?
que se pone contra,
Yeah, it's
se
good
posicionan contra
that
personas
we
de
answered this
otras
question. I
religiones,
know that
sobre todo
some
las
questions are very complex,
religiones de
but
matrices
regarding this
africanas e
one,
indígenas,
thank
poniendo
you,
sobre ellas
Sarah, for your question.
el
Is
título
very
de diabólico
important
y demoníaco,
because
y
the
a partir de eso
religious
se
racism might
desarrolla
not be a
toda una
reality in all the
estructura de
territories
violencia,
that are represented here,
desde
but
la
in
destrucción
Brazil,
de
this
sus
is a
casas,
very
de
strong
sus ambientes
reality.
de
The
espiritualidad,
religious racism
también
is
la
a
agresión
position, at least in
física
Brazil, of
hasta la muerte.
Christians
Son
that
cristianos,
it's
ditos
in
muy piedosos, ditos
contrary,
que siguen a
they're
Dios,
against people of
pero
other
que
religions,
miran el
especially
otro que es diferente
other
de
religions
sí
if they come from
y
Africa.
ven, enxergan un enemigo
And
que
so
debe
they
ser
put
destruído.
themselves above
Entonces, isso tudo
them and they
estruturado sobre la
call
idea de
them that they
la
are
religión
evil
que sea
religions.
correcta o
And
la
so
religión que
they
sea
discusses
incorrecta.
violence against them, against
Entonces, el
these
racismo
other religions.
religioso es
They
eso.
destroy
En
their
el mundo
houses, their
tenemos
churches, their
otros
land,
ejemplos, ¿no?
and there is a
Pero que en mi
physical aggression
realidad
against
es
them
cuando
until
los
they can even
cristianos
be
que
killed.
tienen
These are
sido
Christians.
la mayoría en Brasil,
They
sea
are
evangélico o
very
católicos,
good
se
people, they're compassionate
estructuran en
people, they
una
follow God,
posición
but they
fundamentalista
see
para
the
hacer
others that are
agresiones
different
contra
from them,
vosotros. Un caso muy triste que
and they see
ocurre
them
todos
as
los días
enemies that
aquí en
must be
Brasil es la
destroyed.
muerte de
So
personas de
all this
fe,
is built
de
upon
espiritualidad indígena, por ejemplo.
their
Há pouquíssimo
religion,
tempo,
which
houve
is they classify as correct or incorrect religion.
grupo
So
de
religious
evangélicos
racism
em
that's what
pueblo
it's all
indígena
about. And across the world, we
ateou
have other
fogo em
examples,
uma
but in
casa
my
de
own
reza.
context and reality
Casa de
is
reza é
that
o
these
ambiente onde
Christians who
chamán
have been the majority,
atiende as pessoas.
whether they're Catholic or
Dentro de la
evangelical,
casa
they put
estavam
themselves in a
uma mulher
fundamentalist
e homem,
position
os
so that they
dois
can
chamãs
justify
de
their
aquele
aggression
pueblo
against other
e
people,
foram
other
muertos
religions.
com
There is a very
fogo
sad
dentro
reality
de
that
la
happens
casa
every day in Brazil, which
por
is the death
personas evangélicas.
of
Eso
people of
es
faith.
o
For
ejemplo
instance,
mais
the
doloroso
indigenous
de
spirituality.
racismo religioso, ¿no?
For example,
Seguindo,
a
habló
group of
sobre lo
evangelists
difícil
in an indigenous
desenredar de la
town,
doctrina de la
they
conquista
set
del cristianismo. Sí,
fire
sí.
in a church.
Necesitamos
This
lembrar
is where a
que el
shaman
cristianismo
was
es
taking
una
care of
construcción
people and
colonial.
healing people. And he was
Necesitamos
in a
lembrar
structure, in
que
a
el
building,
colonialismo
and there was a
nace
man
en
and a
Constantino,
woman, and
imperador,
both shamans
colonizador, que mira
were
el
killed in a
movimiento
fire
de
while
Jesús
they were
en la
inside the
iglesia
house,
primitiva
because
que
by
hacía
these
300
evangelist
años, aproximadamente
people.
300,
So
400
this is a
años,
very
y percebe
painful
que
example of
necesitaba
religious racism.
apoderarse de la fuerza
And
desse
then
grupo para que pudesse
talk about how to get
resolver
rid
sus
of
problemas
the
en las
dismantling of
províncias del
this
Imperio Romano.
discovery.
Entonces,
Yeah, we need
cambió
to remember
o
that
grupo de Jesús
Christianism
em
is a
uma religião
colonialism
del
structure. We
Estado.
need to
E
remember
quando
that
mucha plata,
colonialism is
mucho
born with
poder,
Constantine
tornou
is an emperor who
mejor,
sees
construyó el
the Christian
cristianismo.
movement in the primitive church
Entonces, a partir
about
de eso,
300 or 400
Constantino
years
conquista
ago, and he perceives, he
espacios
sees
en
that
las
he needs
mentes
to
y
be
corazones de las
empowered, and
personas que
he
estaban
needs to
alcanzadas.
take
A partir de
their
eso,
power
todo lo
so that he
cristianismo
could resolve
de,
his own
de
problems in all the
Europa
provinces
tiene
that the Roman Empire
por
had control
objetivo
over.
alcanzar
So
los
he
territorios
changed
no cristianos,
from a
territorios
group from the
primitivos,
religion of a group
para
into the
darle
religion of the
luz.
state.
De ahí
He
viene
put a
el
lot of money
iluminismo
into it,
y
a lot of
darle
power,
progreso,
and this,
pero que ninguna de esas cosas era su
and he
objetivo, sino
built
conquistar.
the
La
Christianism as we
conquista,
know it.
la invasión
So from
que
then on,
se da en Brasil es
Constantine,
una invasión
he
cristiana. La
conquered
coroa y la iglesia estaban
spaces
juntas
in the
para
mind
explorar
and
mi
the
tierra,
hearts of
que tiene por
people
nombre Pindorama,
that he was
la
reaching.
tierra de las palmeras.
So from
de
then on,
mi pueblo.
all the
Entonces, es muy
Christianism
difícil
in
hacer
Europe
la desconexión
has
del
as an
cristianismo y de
objective
la,
to
de la
reach
conquista
these
de la misma
non-Christian
forma de
territories,
cristianismo y la
this
invasión y
primitive
la opresión y la
lands,
dominación.
so
Es
that
muy
they
difícil.
can
Pero
give
que
them
tenemos
light
una
and illumination
herramienta,
and
¿no?
give them progress and
El
advancement,
pensamiento
but
decolonial,
none of them was their true
la
objective. Their
ecoteología
true objective was
decolonial
to
o la
conquer,
teología
to
decolonial
invade
no
the
son
invasion
la
of these people.
resolución.
For
No.
instance, the invasion
No
that happened in
somos
Brazil was
personas que
done by
piensan
Christians.
y tiene una
The
herramienta
Christians and the
que
state
se
was in
estructura
cahoots to
en
conquer
la
my
posibilidad
town,
de
which is known
escuchar
as
las
the town or
diversas
the city of
voces
palm
a
trees. It is
respecto.
very difficult to
Y la
disconnect
Biblia nos dice que en
Christianism
la
and
multitud de
colonialism,
las palabras reside la sabiduría,
because
¿no?
they're really the
En
same
el
thing. They were
eurocentrismo
involved
nos
into the
temos una voz.
domination and the
No
conquest.
colonialismo nos temos una
But we have
voz, que es
one
la voz del
tool,
poder.
which is the
En
thought
el
of
pensamiento decolonial
colonialism,
nos
which is the
fomos a escuchar la diversidad de
eco-theology
voces.
of colonialism.
Entonces,
Is
Dios
not
habla
the
en medio de la
answer.
multitud.
It's not people they need to
Thank you for that
to
response.
listen to
I'd
different
love to ask
voices.
more questions, but I'm noticing our time, so
And
I'll pass
the
it over
Bible
to
says that in the multitude and the abundance of words is where wisdom resides, but our ego says, no, there is only one voice. In colonialism, there is
I
only
think
one
Cheryl
voice,
has
the
passed it
power.
over to you. Mhm.
Okay.
And the thinking behind colonialism
Ok, entiendo entonces que lamentablemente no tenemos más tiempo.
cannot
Creo que la
listen
pregunta que
this
había hecho
diversity of
Revocatus
voices, but
Leonard
God
sobre qué
speaks
podemos
in the
hacer,
middle, in the
cómo
midst
podemos
of
apoyar
this
las
multitude of
comunidades
people.
vulnerables en cierta forma. Sara la respondió hace poco, así que esperamos que así haya sido. Creo que si Sara o Josias tienen algún último pensamiento que quieran compartir en este momento, con eso cerramos y luego sí le doy el pase a Cheryl para que ya nos despida. Así que Josias o Sarah, adelante, si quieren decir una última palabra. Bienvenido.
Una cosita, yo estoy viendo que tiene muchas cosas las preguntas. Yo puedo tal vez
Okay, so I
responder a través de
understand
email
that
después.
we don't have
Yo
more
miré
time for
Marshall
more
que escribió para mí,
questions, but
ya tomé nota de su
regarding this
email,
other question
tentaremos
is how
hablar,
can
pues
we
ello está en Pernambuco. Me gustaría
help
mucho
these
poder
communities? I think that
responder
Sarah
las
kind
otras
of
preguntas y puedo
answered this, and I hope
hacerlo
that
por email después si ustedes pueden
but
me
if
mandar
Sarah or
las cuestiones
Josias
de las otras
have one
personas.
last
Me
thought,
gustaría
one last
mucho
comment,
poder
then
colaborar, compartir
we will
con
close. If
poquito que
not,
Dios tiene
Cheryl will
permitido, entonces, para que nosotros
close
y
this
nosotras
meeting
podamos caminar
off.
mejor.
Yeah, just one thing. I see that
Thank
there
you
are a
for
lot
that,
of
Josias. And yes,
questions
Sarah, please.
I would just like
perhaps
to
I
encourage
can
people
answer
to
them via
find us at
email. I saw a question by
dismantlediscovery.org. We are a
Marshall
movement of
that
ordinary
he
people, and we
answered
really
me,
long
that
to
he
be in
asked me,
relationship with you.
and
And you can find us there. We have many public meetings every
took
single month
her
on
question,
Zoom.
and I
Please
will
do look for us
answer
there.
to her via email.
Thank you for that. And I think this is just a beautiful way to wrap up to the reminder that the struggle
perhaps
continues.
you
There are
can
ways to continue
submit
connection,
these questions to me,
involvement.
and I would
Please
love
do
to
follow up on those
answer
links
and
and
collaborate
also look into Pacific
with
Lutheran
the
Theological
little
Seminary
bit
and our
that
certificate
God has
programs, as
allowed
well
me,
as Lutherans Restoring Creation,
so that we
our
can walk
sponsors
together
today. Thank you
better.
so much to Josias and to Sarah for really insightful, profound, and very convicting calls to action for all of us to join the movement, to not simply do so in simple ways, but to really put our bodies and our lives into the struggle alongside those who don't have any choice but to be in the struggle for justice on the front of racism and climate change. So thank you so much to both of you. Thank you to our facilitators, our translators, all the folks helping behind the scenes, all the ways that all of creation has been with us, supporting us and making these connections possible around the world. We will be sharing this recording with all of you who were attending. You could also find a recording of this on YouTube if you'd like to share it. And finally, we will be having the third conversation in our series coming up in October. So we'll be sharing more information about that, but that will be another dialogue exploring the intersection of race and climate change. Thank you so much for being here. Please do continue to honor the day of Juneteenth, National Indigenous Peoples Day in Canada coming up on Saturday as well, and all of the remembrances of this time of year. Blessings to you all. Be well and stay safe until we can meet again. Thank you.